afternoon, everybody. We are live. It is The View from the Top. Hi there to Ray. Hi there to Janet. Good morning to you. To Jerry, good morning. This is such a great topic. To Sola, to Susan. I mean, people are coming in from all over the world because this is such an important subject. Because today we are going to be talking about racial diversity, inclusion, and global mobility. Now, you can look at DE&I through all sorts of different lenses. You can look at it through the lens of gender, of orientation, of racial diversity, and that's the lens we're looking at it through specifically today. And it is such an important subject that I'm just delighted that so many of you have joined us today for this really important topic. And we're going to be very inclusive actually in the discussion. So as we go through this discussion, please, we're going to try and engage with the audience as much as possible, and please feed through all your questions. We've also, of course, got our immigration and our tax updates. So we've got a really big show for you today, but you know how it works, everybody. Join the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are. I know loads of you are already saying that, which is great to see all our friends joining us today. But if you're new to the show, please don't be a stranger, don't be shy. The only way we know who's out there in the world with us is if you write in the comments box. So please do write in the comments box and let us know that you're with us today. By the way, if you do want to get your CPE credits, then we are delighted to give you CPE credits from, well, you can get them from SHRM, you can get them from HRCI, and of course you can get them from Worldwide ERC. Our good friends at Rocket Mortgage give us the credits for SHRM and for HRCI, and our good friends at ERC give us their credits for GMS and CRP. I'll leave that up there for a moment so you can see all those credits. If you need your credits, then please then just go, I don't know, get your camera out, take a picture, take a screenshot, write it down. But anyway, we're going to leave it up there just for a few minutes. Next week, we're going to be talking about innovation in practice. So we've got not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 6 separate case studies that we're going to be sharing about really exciting ways that companies are innovating in practice with tech. So a great show for you next week. Anyway, that's all about this week. What I want to do now is start telling you a bit about the breaking news. Every week we like to share a little bit of breaking news, what's been going on in our industry. So without further ado, let's find out what's been going on in the wonderful world of global mobility in the last 7 days. So lots of news there. Congratulations from everybody who's been promoted, everyone who's moved job, all our new change makers. And in particular, I suppose, lots of big news there from Cartus. And we wish Katrina Helmkamp a very happy retirement. She's announced her retirement. And of course, a big congratulations to Eric Barnes, who is taking over, as I understand it, as the interim CEO from the CFO position. So congratulations to him and happy retirement to Katrina. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to our immigration update. So without further ado, let's bring on Julia Onslow-Cole. But everybody, you know how it works. Please hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's bring on to stage Julia Onslow-Cole.
Brian.
Hi, Julia. So last time we left you, you've been in San Francisco, then you went to New York, and then I think I saw pictures
I
of
was
you
in Washington. I went to Washington, and then I saw Julie in Washington.
And then you went to New York, and then you've been to Florida.
Yeah, and I got home this morning.
Okay, so we're going to have a jet lagged Julie Onslow Cole giving us some hopefully not jet lagged immigration advice. So, Julia, what are we talking about today?
Yes, so the last few weeks I've just been concentrating on the US, and this is my last US update, and then I'm going to move on to Europe next week. But I wanted to talk about getting ready for the H-1B lottery, because it's a really very big thing for employers. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Brent Riley and Rachel Beardsley from the New York office. So the H-1B, it's the stable visa for any organization in the US with professionals, and it's for specialty occupations. And the key thing is that the job itself has to require a degree, and the individual must have that specific degree that's required. So you can't just say, oh, this is a very good chap from Harvard, you know, that I'm sure it doesn't really matter what he studied. It has to be a degree that's relevant for the role. And the dates of the lottery have just been announced. So they were actually announced while I was in New York. And the dates are March the 1st to the 17th. And then USCIS will actually give you the notification by the end of March, the 31st of March. So this is the 4th year of the new system. And the old system was that you had to file a whole petition to go into the lottery. But now there's a registration, which is much, much easier. And it contains just biographical information. But the important thing is employers have to review everything very carefully. So if you have like 50 vacancies and you have 50 people that you want to fill those vacancies, you can't just sort of register and apply for 200. Because in good faith, if that person is approved, then in good faith, employers are expected to then file. And you know, if there isn't a good reason for them not to file, then you know that's very much frowned upon. So you've got to really ensure that the name that you put in for the registration, that person has at least a bachelor's degree, and that's in the relevant subject it's needed for the job. And also you've got to ensure that they're being offered the prevailing wage. And we did discuss this 2 weeks ago when I was talking about layoffs in the US and the difficulty about prevailing wage and perms. But prevailing wage, it's a complex area. The Department of Labor has a lot of data depending on positions and their geographical area. And there's also alternate wage salaries you can look up, but that's a very important component before you should register. So that's the first thing. Now, last year, there were 65,000 places for bachelor degree holders and then 20,000 for masters. So if you have a master's degree, you can go in twice to the lottery, because you could go in first on the 65,000. And if you're unlucky, you can apply second in the 20,000. And that's the only example of where you could sort of have two goes at the lottery.
And it is purely luck.
Yeah, purely luck. And last year it was about 17.5% were lucky. So it's about 484,000 places. People applied for 85,000 places. So by the 31st of March, you will know whether or not you were lucky. And you'll have 90 days to file your petition. And we believe, but the date hasn't been confirmed yet, that will be from Monday, the 3rd of April. Now, typically, one of the top tips we want to give is that if you have a lot of students in your population who are doing optional practical training, OPT, so if you've just got a normal degree, you could get 1 year automatically working with a company. If you have a STEM degree, it's 3 years. But some employers don't actually start applying for those individuals to get into the lottery until the end of their training. Whereas really you should be applying every year, because you might not be lucky and then you want to try again. So anyone who's on
applying once doesn't stop you from applying again. So
exactly.
apply as often as you can and get in early. Yeah.
And early, exactly that. And then also you should be thinking about your intercompany transfers, visas, your L1Bs, and considering people outside of the US. And the reason that the H1B is so popular is it can switch to a green card. And the final 2 points I wanted to make is that remember that if you're a spouse of an H1B, you can't work unless you're on a pathway to a green card. That's a generalized rule, but that is something that Permits Foundation has been really lobbying about. And the last thing to say is you might hear of multiple lotteries, and that's because when there's a number of registrations, but then perhaps for different reasons, maybe an employer has made a lot of redundancies and they genuinely don't want now to pursue the application, there are some places left over. And so there will be another lottery, but you don't do anything because you're already in the lottery, if you see what I mean. So when people hear that, they say, oh, have we missed a chance because we think there's another lottery, but it's the same pool of people.
And just to pick up on Chris Henry's point, and we'll pull that up on screen. Chris, you can't appeal the lottery. If you don't get lucky, there's no appeal process. No, that definitely goes into the nice try category. Absolutely.
I hope you're having a very nice evening, Chris. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, you can't.
Okay, so thank you ever so much, Julie. That's a wonderful, wonderful update. We're now going to move on to talk about tax. In fact, we're going to Spain. We're going to be talking about Spanish tax. So everybody, you know how it works. As we play the intro video for Julie Barron, and she's bringing with her colleague Marta Quintero from Madrid. Everybody hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's say hello to Julie and to her special guest, Marta Quintero. Hey, Julie. Hey, Marta. Welcome to the show. So, Julie, tell us what we're going to be talking about today and lead into our conversations.
Sure. Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me again. I don't know how long it's going to take before I get used to that video, but I do enjoy being a knight. So today we are going to talk about some new updates in Spain. Spain is trying to bring a lot of people into Spain and encourage businesses to move there as well as individuals to move there. So I invited my colleague Marta Quintero, who's on with me, to speak a bit about some of the details of the new Spanish rules. So over to you, Marta.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Brian. So yes, as Brian and Julie have introduced, in Spain, there was a recent law approved. It was entered into force this 1st of January. And this new law, the intention of this new law is to adapt the Spanish environment to the world that was post-COVID. And the idea is to bring new people coming to Spain to work and to ease the process, both from an immigration and also from a tax perspective. So from an immigration perspective, this new law allows non-European Union individuals to apply for a type of a visa nomad. If they are in their home country, they will be able to apply for this visa nomad in their country's consulate and for a period of 1 year. Also, for individuals that already are in Spain are also allowed to apply for a residency permit as digital nomad in Spain that will last for a 3-year period. There is also an extension of the validity of the permission for highly qualified employees. Before it was only for 2 years, but right now has been extended to 3 years. There is a new definition of the entrepreneurial activity. with more focus on the individual's activity, the business, the applicant's profile, etc. And last, from an immigration perspective, is that there is a relaxation and easing of the process to apply and the requirements to apply for certain work permits. This will avoid the delays, the typical delays that there are in Spain when somebody wants to start working in Spain, throughout a simplification of the requirements to apply for the highly qualified visa. For example, the Spanish government will allow the individuals to be registered with the Spanish Social Security using their passport while they get their Spanish tax ID, or they will reduce the requirements to apply for this highly qualified personal visa. Along with the immigration improvements, we also have interesting changes from a tax perspective. First of all, the commonly called the Beckham Law has been modified, and right now the new Beckham Law allows individuals to apply for this more beneficial regime when the employees have been considered Spanish tax non-resident for 5 years, whereas before they were required to be non-resident for 10 years. Also, this Beckham Law is extended not only to local employees or employees assigned to work in Spain, but is also allowed for typical entrepreneurs or individuals that apply for a nomad visa and that do not necessarily have a work contract in Spain, but want to work remotely in Spain. And also a very good improvement in the Beckham Law is that this law is no longer applicable to just the employees only, but is also going to be applicable to their wives or husbands when they come with them to Spain and they don't have a job yet, but they're planning to work in Spain afterwards. Also, apart from the Beckham Law, there is also an increase of the exemption applied to delivery of shares from startup companies to the employees. Before we have the exemption up only to 12,000 euros, but right now this exemption has been increased up to 50,000 euros. And also there is an increase of the deduction applicable to people that want to invest in startup laws companies. And I think that's pretty much what the highlights of the news updates in Spain.
Okay, so thank you so much. That a lot of information, a huge amount of information there in just a few minutes. That's really appreciated. But so there's definitely a mood in Madrid to encourage foreign investment and foreign talent to move into Spain, which is wonderful to see, and presumably quite favorable tax rates now compared to the tax rates that would otherwise have been the case. So that's absolutely great news. So Julie and Marta, we really appreciate you coming on board, joining us. I'm just going to bring on Tally, our producer, but everybody hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button as we bring on Tally and we say goodbye and thank you so much for your help to Marta and to Julia.
Bye, Marta. Bye, Julie. Hi, Brian.
Hi. So what's news, Tally?
Okay, I'm going to be very quick, but just before I'm starting with my slides, I wanted to mention that today, if anyone is around Denver and was always wondering who are these wonderful people that are change makers and would consider maybe joining, our change makers are meeting today in Denver. So if anyone wants to ask me about it, send a message in the comments. I already saw a comment from Karen Hale, and she said that they have an ice storm. So I really hope that would not ruin the meeting, but it is a real face-to-face local meeting. What I want to talk about today is that Benevo is looking to strengthen our supplier partner network. And we're looking for some good companies that are offering exceptional experience to relocating employees. So if anyone is interested in being considered for joining our network, I will send a link to a form and you can fill it up and we begin the dialogue.
And these are suppliers of any type, so they can be household goods, they could be pet relocation, they could be whatever, DSPs, they could be intercultural training. I mean, you know.
Yes, but with one condition.
Yeah. Exceptional
Exceptional service.
Absolutely.
So they have to be good. Okay. So the second thing that I wanted to mention is that we're taking registration to the Mobility Masterclass with Pankaj and Wes Okomora. I will send the link to that too. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, because I know that Pris and Ezeibe are already waiting in the green room, we wanted to mention that in May, we're going to have our new Global Mobility Top 100. And this time, it's going to be focused on DE&I champions. So it could be from different areas. And we're going to talk a lot more about it because there's still a lot of time. But just because this is the subject of today's show, I thought it would be nice to mention that. So keep that in mind, and you can start thinking of candidates. And I think we already have 2 of them back in the green room.
Absolutely. So we're going to be, without further ado, let's start talking about this really hugely important subject about racial diversity and inclusion in global mobility. So Tali, once again, many thanks for your help. But everybody, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button as we welcome onto stage Ezeibe, Agomo and Pris Monticelli. Hey, Pris. Hey, Ezeibe. How are you both?
Hi,
Hey,
Brian.
Brian. Doing
Cool.
good, thanks.
So tell me where you both are. Pris, where are you?
I'm in a small seaside town in Italy called Giulianova. You can look it up on Google.
Okay, I think everybody's just jealous at the moment. Okay, so you're in a seaside town in Italy. I think the world has just gone green with envy that you're living out there. We'll come back to that in a moment. Actually, I want to find out a bit more about your career journey. And Ezeibe, whereabouts are you right now?
Oh, well, I'm from a small seaside town called London, in the UK.
Riverside, anyway. Yeah.
It is
a
nice.
small Thames-side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on.
Okay, so you're in London, and Pris, you're in Italy. So let's start with you, Pris. So tell us about your background, because you've lived in a lot of countries growing up. You were telling me earlier. Jelisova, we got there. So
Yeah. Yes. My formative years were spent in Africa, the UK, and the US. My father was a vicar and a missionary for the Church of England. And so I sort of tailed around different countries where he worked. So I did part of my living in Kenya, Zambia, the US in Atlanta and Indianapolis, and then in London.
So, wow. I mean, so your schooling must have been sort of moved around from one system to another. I mean, where did you go to school when you were like sort of primary and sort of secondary sort of school age?
Primary is a mixture of Kenya and the US, US, yeah, middle school, I suppose, the US and Zambia, and then the UK.
Okay. And Ezeibe, you grew up in Nigeria, that's right, isn't it? And then you tell me a bit about your early days.
Absolutely, yes. So I was born and brought up in Lagos. That's because rather interestingly, my mom chose to return from London 2 months before my birth. I've said thank you to her ever since for all the visa issues that that triggered later in life. I grew up in Lagos.
So you're a dual national then?
I am.
Yeah.
So I qualified as a lawyer in London. Well, first of all in Lagos, and then I came to London and did a master's in King's College London, and then qualified as a Solicitor of England and Wales as well, because I really, really, really like studying. Yeah, so I've lived in both of those. I've had a bit of a stint in the US as well, and worked a couple of years out there on assignment. but nowhere near as much as you, Pris.
Okay, well, and tell me a bit about your work experiences and how how you both got into this game. How did you get into mobility? And tell us a bit about the programs that you run. I just want to put context to our discussions.
Yeah, so I fell into mobility. I did an internship for the Atlanta Olympics in Atlanta in '96.
Nice job.
Yeah, it was. And one of the things that they asked me to do was interview all the international recruits and manage their onboarding. So obviously, I didn't realize it was mobility at the time, but I was helping people get visas, helping them get national insurance, social security numbers, and getting them settled into the US. Then when I came back to the UK, I did a master's in international HR. And while I was at the BBC, I picked up the mobility program for the BBC. So that's how I fell into it, really.
Okay, so you've been in the BBC and then you're with, obviously, Publicis now.
Yes.
Okay, and how many people, for people that don't know Publicis, tell us a bit about the company and how many people you typically move in a year.
Publicis is a 100,000 people company in over 100 countries. So we, the mobility team, are responsible for moving around 6,000 people globally on different mobility policies, including our very famous Work Your World remote working policy.
Absolutely. I remember that at the time when people were talking about COVID and everything, you guys were pretty famous for what you were doing.
Yes.
Maybe we'll get back onto that on another show. So you're managing 6,000 moves from the seaside.
Not just me. Yeah.
I've got this picture of you sitting on the beach in your deck chair, managing 6,000 moves, thinking this isn't difficult.
I wish, yeah, but yeah.
There's a whole team there. Anyway, Ezeibe, tell us about your program at Equinix.
Sure. So first of all, before I head into the program, your earlier question was how we got into mobility. So I actually practiced immigration law first, and then I was headhunted into an IT consultancy firm called Sapient back in 2008. And yeah,
which is part of
Well, Ezeibe and I work together at Sapient.
You've worked together, okay? Right.
We have worked together, yes, because Publicis acquired Sapient later on in the game. But pre-acquisition, so Sapient wanted someone to come in to help the company get compliant with the points-based system in the UK, which were the rules then. And so I did that. And as I joined, my boss at the time said at the end of that program, oh, by the way, immigration is not all we do. And that was my introduction to global mobility. Thought it was fascinating. Somebody locked the doors and I never left. So Equinix, so we're 12,000. So we're the world's digital infrastructure company. Essentially, we work with the major cloud providers, etc. We are foundational to the infrastructure of the internet and interconnectivity and interconnecting the world's largest businesses. And the simplest way I say this sometimes is we make the internet work. And we're the infrastructural glue that makes that work. 12,000 employees across the world. The program is between 500 and 1,000 across our program. So we're immigration and mobility. So, and that includes flexible working and one-way moves.
Okay, well, let's get into the subject, and this can be sometimes quite a raw subject, but let's get straight into it. And actually, I want to start off by asking the audience a question, and again, you can share with in the audience the better. And the question is this: have you witnessed any non-inclusive behaviour, either directly yourself, you've experienced it, or you've witnessed it? But let's just start off about that. And Pris, I mean, do you want to sort of just start off by any of your sort of experiences? I'm guessing the answer is yes. Otherwise, we wouldn't really be having the discussion today. but that if you like, that's our opener. So can you just tell us, about some of your experiences?
Yes, I think I have sort of experienced it in different ways. So one as a woman and one as a Black person. And they can be crossed in that, but judgments that people make of you before you even open your mouth or do anything. And it's something that you grow up seeing, but accepting as reality. And my mother always used to tell me, don't be too loud. Always be small. Don't make people uncomfortable, because you will be judged differently from everyone. So people, and I'm speaking from my experiences, obviously, people will grow up with that kind of conditioning of, I shouldn't be seen. And then they go into environments, whether it's school or work, where other people, their managers, their colleagues, are willing not to see them. So, and that's basically what you sort of see in most people who are people of color, or people who come from different backgrounds to the majority of the group in the environment they're in.
Your mother said to you, basically, be small, don't be big, make yourself smaller. I mean, it's just so sad. I know, that was her way, presumably, of protecting, helping you coping and protecting.
Yes.
Yeah. And what would that? I mean, did you have a similar experience as Ezeibe?
Well, I mean, when Pris says that, it reminds me of parental advice I received. So now, my experience was, because I grew up in a Black majority country, first of all, my parents did that for a reason, because they said they had seen the impact and the loss of identity of second-generation kids, and they didn't want that for us, for those who were born as a minority in a different country and grew up there. And so they wanted us to have a sense of who we are. So I came into London with that sense of who I am, and not really seeing, a kind of non-racial lens, right? Just, we're all the same. And then I walked into the city of London and into the corporate life of the city of London, and realized something was different. I realized that, especially with the older generation, there was a distinct lack of respect, a surprise initially at even seeing me around some tables, right? It was a surprise. I would walk in, I wouldn't recognize it. After a while, I realized I'm the only person of African descent here. I noticed I avoided the word black because I looked really carefully at my color palette this morning, and this looked pretty brown to me. But I don't know. that's a different topic. Like, I don't know what we're doing about color education, but that's brown. But anyway, so yes, my first experiences were like, whoa, I'm not expected to be here. Generally speaking, I got a lot better responses when people thought me to be lower, downtrodden, somewhat needing of help. I got backs up when people saw me to be portraying myself as an equal and on the same level. That's when the smiles sort of like changed, and the distance and a slight coldness, again, more with the older than the younger. And that's where hope springs, that education, and year on year, generation upon generation, the more we talk about this, the more we have a chance of making things better.
Okay, I mean, that's so powerful. So basically, if you were doing a junior job, it was easier, and that echoes something. Oh, actually, I'll pick up Richard's comment in a moment. But we had, I think it was Marcia Longdon on the show from Kingsley Napley a while ago, and she was saying that in her lived experience was she talked about attending a meeting, and she was a partner, and she was a black woman, and she was with a junior who I think was a white man. And immediately the clients assumed that he was senior to her and that she was the bag carrier and not him. Is that a common experience? I mean, Pris, have you had that sort of experience? Or do you want to pick up on what Ezeibe was saying there?
Yes, I think it's quite common, and it's sort of normalized. So I don't see it as something not to expect anymore. Because I would get on a call and I would have my juniors, female, quite young, who would join the call, and they would address her as my superior in that conversation, and you sort of have to figure out, again, the voices in your head. Don't create conflict, and find a way of continuing this conversation. And so you live through those things without acting on them because they become so normalized. And this is where we talk about, death by 1,000 paper cuts. So you live through those. They're painful, but you put them aside and continue your life. And that can happen 1,000 times a day. And when 1,000 paper cuts happen on the same place, you tend to have a bigger wound that is quite difficult to heal. So people around are walking, it could be female, it could be other different groups, but especially different races in predominantly white environments live through that on every single day. And it's quite difficult to be able to articulate that, because we also have ingrained in us the need to not make other people uncomfortable.
Okay, I mean, that is such a powerful phrase, death by 1,000 paper cuts. I mean, it's a harrowing phrase. Let's just pick up some of the comments. I'll just take this comment from Laura O'Connell. Here we are. Interesting comment about the older generation. I hear so much about non-inclusive behaviour toward older employees in the hiring process and the workforce. I mean, that's interesting. So I think what Laura's saying is that the older generation, it might be more of a problem, but they themselves, the older generation, sometimes they're facing bias because people are saying, well, an older person can't do it. And actually, maybe it's not for today, but we haven't actually talked about ageism on our show. I mean, that's a whole other lens to diversity. And let's just bring up Richard's comment as well. Richard Majewski said, I'd be interested to hear views on colour blindness. Oh, I consider you as white, so to speak. I mean, I think what Richard's saying is that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So tell me, what do you? Tell me your take.
I have a story about that. So in 2020, when the George Floyd situation happened, so obviously most organizations had forums to discuss this subject, and I had some colleagues who sort of contacted me and said, "Oh, you know what, Pris? I never saw you as Black. So that it never occurred to me that you suffer through these things. To me, you've always been white." And that was a big shock to me, because basically you've confirmed you've never seen me, because you've created a vision of me of what is acceptable to you. Right?
Do you think you mean they physically hadn't seen you? They just only
no.
you by telephone.
They haven't seen me as who I am, because they have decided I have to belong into a certain group of people that is acceptable to them. So that is, to me, what is colorblindness, is not seeing the people for who they are.
Yeah. I mean, that, if I may, but so the earlier comment about the ageism, we may touch that really quickly, because that's something that it really strikes a chord with me. It's not just about ageism, or inclusion is not just about one aspect of a disadvantaged group. There are many disadvantaged groups in various fora. And if we're to be truly inclusive, we really have to look with a broad lens. And I think it's a problem when, in trying to achieve inclusion, we move in such a way that becomes inequitable across the board, right? Or we look only on one thing. Like, I've been in several conversations in the past where we're talking about diversity, and it's an exclusively gender conversation. And then everyone's like, yes, we're achieving diversity, because I'm thinking, but there's so much to diversity. Why aren't we looking at the rest of it? Right? And I know the answers aren't easy, and I know the problem is vast. The fact that we're having the conversation at all is a good starting point. The fact that so many organizations, including ours, are having these conversations and have the intent to do better and better is a good thing. But we do need to go broad lens in solving the real problem.
Do you sometimes find, I don't know whether you've sort of whether you've emailed people or indeed whether you sent in a resume or something, that your name maybe gets a different reaction. I mean, Pris, you've got an Italian last name, and Ezeibe, I'm guessing your last name is Nigerian.
Both first and last, very Nigerian.
Actually, I thought that was an easy guess, but do you think you'd get a different response sometimes if you were applying to a job and your name was, John Smith or something?
Yeah, I think I've seen people react differently to me when they actually see me after they've had email conversations with me, because in their emails, if they haven't seen my picture or anything, they would assume I was an Italian person. And then if I walk in the room, they were just like, I'm looking for Pris. And I'm like, that's me. No, I mean, Pris Monticelli. And, so people just will assume that certain people look, certain names belong to certain people. And I've got a friend who's called Tyler, who's a female Black person, and people expect him to be white. So there is this bias of certain names belong to certain places, and if you have a different name, then you don't belong to that society. There is that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what about taking things forward? I mean, you guys have both been incredibly successful in your careers, and that's one of the reasons at the beginning I was getting you to talk about your career paths and the programs that you run. But you must have met a lot of barriers on the way. How did you overcome those barriers to get where you got? And I suppose the other side of that is, what tips would you give the next generation?
Yeah. So I start. So I mean, the first thing for me, my mom told me that as a minority, and this is based on experiences of relatives, everyone, because we've had family working in different countries for years and years and years. As a minority, you're going to have to be better than everybody else in order to move at the same pace. Yeah. It's true. There are lots of studies that confirm
it's a bit like you've given everybody else a head start. You got to be. It's like sort of me running a race against Usain Bolt or something. That he's got to give me a decent head start, otherwise the race.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to get the same opportunities, you're going to have to be a lot better. It's not fair. I remember talking in a different forum about this to some young folks. I'm like, it's not fair, but it's real. The first thing you're going to have to do to succeed is you have to be excellent. But when you get every opportunity, someone mentioned in the comment about education, that is so important. And it's not just formal education. Every opportunity you have to interact with someone who hasn't interacted with a minority before is an opportunity to educate. Because that person's coming to that conversation, into that, having this preconception, what's been fed to them through decades and decades of multimedia conditioning. They encounter you, and every encounter with you is an opportunity to re-educate them. So how do I get past it? First thing is, I didn't use being a minority as a crutch. I didn't think because I'm a minority I can't make it. Although I know what I'm worth, I know what I can achieve, I know there are obstacles, but I'm not going to hold myself back because of this. I'm going to do the very best I can. And even if I see others running faster than I'm running past and I'm looking left and right, I'm still going to put my head down and run this race of mine and continually try in my sphere to re-educate those that I encounter, like, hey, and you just need one or two breakthrough, and that opens the door for many, many more.
Yeah.
One or two do that, then everyone is like, oh, and then it keeps flowing from there. And that's what's been happening over and over and over again. How many people do we have now in America in high levels of political office? Started from the first, councillor, mayor, right?
Yeah, I think representation matters a great deal. And for me, it's, like Ezeibe, with the different warnings I had, I also had parents who actually believed in me and told me I was worthy to succeed. But they also did tell me, if I came home with a B plus, it'd be like, well, that's not good enough, because you need to have an A plus to be equal to somebody who has a C. That was the message I had. So working
really,
hard is something that
really, Pris, that's how your parents spoke to you. They said that. Okay,
yes.
so really sort of telling you, you got to be better than the rest to be the same as the rest.
To be the same. So so you come home with a B plus, then to them it's a D equivalent. So I was used to having that mentality of, if I'm doing this, if I'm going to get the promotion, then I have to do 10 times more stuff than my colleagues. That's something it's not right. I think for us as leaders now, we need to be able to recognize that and say it's not fair, and think about the biases, because the bias is not most times it's not intentional. So you might not even recognize that the judgments, the policies, or the behaviors that you're creating in an organization are putting certain groups of people back. So I think it's just about opening your eyes and thinking twice before you make judgments or decisions on people.
It's interesting. Nuran there, who's I'll just pull up Hi Titan Nuran. Nuran said, we've lost her comment. I'd like to pull that comment back up. Said, interesting how our parents all said this. Yes. So presumably that's her lived experience. I'd be interested to know whether other people had exactly the same from their parents, saying that, this is almost like sort of a defense mechanism, that this is what you have to do. Andre says, agreed, Pris. One thing I was always told was you have to be twice as good to get half of what they have. It always stuck with me.
Yeah.
Okay. So this sounds, I'm not sure what country Andre is in, but it sounds like this is something that is maybe, is an experience that people are getting in multiple jurisdictions around the world. But I mean, is it changing? I mean, I know it goes back many years, or too many years perhaps, but we go back to the days of the Obama presidency. Did that make a difference?
I think to me, it made a difference in terms of representation, because you have to remember that some people succeed because they can see someone who looks like them. So it hasn't changed the world to where it needs to be, but it is a step, and people are recognizing, well, if Obama can be a leader of the free world, then maybe somebody in an organization can actually get a certain position in that organization. So to me, it has made a difference.
Yeah, definitely change has been happening. It's definitely been changing over time. Come on, think 200 years back, right? Then 100, then 50. Just watch an old program, watch a documentary from the 60s. It's continuously changing. And I remember just 7-8 years ago, I was talking about with some well-meaning folks talking about how great we were at representation, and I was like, hold on, wait a second. I don't know a single Black VP in that context that I was talking about. And there's a lot more representation, and hopefully it continues, but there is a risk and there is a danger. And when you said Obama, that you can see the danger there. Sometimes when you make one breakthrough, you create a major backlash, right? And that's also why, for the corporate context, I think it's always wise to look broadly, and as you push correctly towards inclusion, let's truly be inclusive, right? Let's truly be inclusive, so we pull everyone forward in an equitable way, and that's not just with hiring, that's also with who are we giving opportunities for assignments, our assignment populations. How many people are moving that are people, of a diverse background? Are we attempting to measure this? Are we even having the conversation? Sometimes just having the conversation.
I really want to get into that. The whole question of diverse expats. By the way, just to let people know, on the Benevo platform, we actually have diversity dashboards so that people can monitor their programs and see. But I mean, one of the things that has come out is that there are actually remarkably few Black expats, and in fact, Black female expats are probably even vanishingly few. I remember having on the show a while ago a lady called Ursula Dyer Leperoli, who's a KPMG partner in Sydney. She's American, but she's based out in Sydney in Australia. And she's a black woman. And she said on the show that in all her years of doing tax entrance and exits meetings, she said, I remember it vividly, she said, I've never met an expat that looked like me. Of all the thousands of meetings she's done, she's never actually had an expat who was another black female. But when you are in your roles of managing large programs, you are moving someone who is from a diverse background. Do you speak to them from your own personal experiences and say, well, actually, this might be an issue you need to address, or you need to be aware of, or a cultural sensitivity, or is that, are you sort of alert to the point that that other people have different lived experiences when they travel? Because you guys have both lived overseas, where for many expats going abroad, they'll never have done it before.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I know that we see a lot in our assignees who come from, who are, I would say, different colors, different, whether they're African, Asian, Middle Eastern, is the support they get when they arrive in certain countries. We have situations where people are refused rental contracts. We have situations where they're
Sorry, say that again. I'm sorry, can I just show you said you have people who are refused rental contracts?
Yes.
On the basis of skin color? Correct.
And we tested this with our DSP by sending somebody who was of a different color and they would get that contract. So you could see it.
And can I ask which sort of countries you're talking about where this has happened?
We've seen it in Germany, France, Sweden. We've also seen situations where actually government offices are refusing to do local registration or putting obstacles for local registration. And when we send their colleagues from the local office, or even though they might not be Swedish, or they might be from a different country, they would be able to register immediately. So we've seen that happen quite a lot. And Jeremy is mentioning that because yes, we've dealt with those kind of cases.
And Jeremy's talking that's in the UK. So we're seeing that in a lot of countries. You mentioned France, Germany, Sweden. Now, this is shocking, and obviously in all those countries, completely illegal, but it's happening.
Yes, it is quite difficult. Like as in microaggression, it's quite difficult to pinpoint that that's the reason that they've said that. But you can rarely prove those kind of issues, right?
Yeah, and one thing I would like to focus us all on as well is the problems are great, the problems are global, the problems are intergenerational, but we shouldn't despair. Because I was chatting with someone this week who said it feels sometimes like you can't really do anything to make a change, because sometimes when you gather to have a conversation, everybody who's gathered to have that conversation is already minded towards making that change, and those who might benefit from a different perspective won't even show up for the conversation in the first place. However, the sheer weight, it's like a snowball. Over time, the more a conversation like this is had, the more we continue pushing that conversation, the more change happens. But a comment was made earlier in the comments that talks about let's celebrate what unites us. And that's also true. And that's where you get into allies. That's where you get into, rather than just fragmenting, right? Let's look at things that unite us and celebrate the commonality, whilst not using that as an excuse to maintain the status quo, because folks, the status quo is broken.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think there's also this idea, I think Ezeibe mentioned it before, it's grouping different groups. Like you cannot compare pain. Just because one group is suffering doesn't mean another group is suffering. So some of the microaggression that I might be going through might be, a female might be experiencing it, but they might be experiencing it differently to what I am. It's not saying that there's no group, different groups are not suffering. Every group is suffering, and having that unity of let us work together and accept each other as human beings. That goes a long way to me.
Absolutely. If I may share, like at Equinix, we have this phrase within our diversity, inclusion, and belonging team, and it's across the company. We want everyone to be able to come to work to say, and be able to say genuinely, I am safe, I belong, and I matter. Right? And
safe,
that's for everyone.
I belong, I matter.
And I matter.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and I think it's such a fantastic phrasing that's not just for the corporate world, but for everywhere. Right? How about we create environments around ourselves where everyone can say, I am safe, I belong, and I matter.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting towards the end of our hour, and that's a really, really sort of positive thing. I just want to move on to one last area, which is what can we do to help the next generation of Ezeibes and Prises who are sort of maybe now in their, you know, in their 20s, they're taking their first steps into global mobility. What can we do in terms of mentoring and helping people develop the next generation?
I think for me, mentoring was helpful. I had good mentors. I did have good managers as well that helped me, that saw me. I think having a mentoring program that actually identifies the needs rather than just okay, we've matched people, now get on with it. And if that succeeds or doesn't succeed, it's up to them. I think it's actually looking at what is the need, how do we get these young people seen in opportunities, and that exposes them to different things, and giving them platforms for them to showcase their talent. I think that's really important. If we have mentoring programs that actually go deeper than just the pairing of individuals, that would really help.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. If folks see people that are in places where they want to get to, they're much more likely to believe it's possible, much more likely to work towards that. Mm-hmm. You know, everyone, I think for the next generation, first we have to be real. We have to be honest about the problems and the challenges, and that helps to prepare people to overcome that. But we have to do that in a positive way that says it's possible to overcome. Let's continue to be the change, right? It's used so often, but it's true. Let's continue to be the change and encourage them that, hey, it's possible. Folks have gotten through this broken system. Mm-hmm. And the broken system is getting less and less broken in many ways over time. So it's hard, but keep at it.
Yeah.
I'm safe, I belong, I matter. The number of people who've posted that, and I just urge everybody out there, put that in the comments box now, everybody. I'm safe, I belong, I matter. Let's get that out there. It is, as Henri has said, that is such a powerful mantra. It's such a powerful phrase. And is that copyright Equinix or?
It is an Equinix phrase, but of course, it is a phrase we want everyone to live by.
It's brilliant. I'm going to bring on our others as we just get to a close. Let's just bring on Julia and Marta and Julie and Tally. I think we've got everybody here now. So we're coming to the end of our hour. It's been an amazing show, and everyone is saying the same. I'm safe, I belong, I matter. And we're going to come back to this show. But again, as we've said, we are going to do this year, our top 100 list is going to be a diversity top 100 champions. So that we're going to be launching that in a few weeks' time. But do start thinking now about who you'd like to nominate. And I think we can probably pretty safely say that Ezeibe and Pris will probably be on that list after today's show, if nothing else, and all the good work you've done. But thank you, everybody. Our hour is back. We're back next week when we're talking about 6 case studies in innovation in global mobility. Meanwhile, I just want to say goodbye to everybody out there, and thank you to the audience. Goodbye, everybody. Take care, and see you all next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.